Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. I'm Thomas Roberts. In just 3 hours, President Obama is scheduled to meet Vladimir Putin right here in New York City. Both leaders are here for the United Nations General Assembly meeting, and a key topic will be figuring out a strategy to end the stalemate and humanitarian crisis in Syria. In his speech this morning, President Obama said he's willing to work with Russia.
The United States is prepared to work with any nation, including Russia and Iran, to resolve the conflict. Catastrophes like what we are seeing in Syria do not take place in countries where there is genuine democracy and respect for the universal values this institution is supposed to defend.
In his speech today, Vladimir Putin spoke of forming an anti-ISIS coalition. However, both he and Iran's president say today they want Syria's Bashar al-Assad to be part of that coalition. President Obama also talked about Ukraine. There, he used some of the same language to describe why Russia must work with international partners to promote democratic movements. And he also explained why U.S. policies in Ukraine, Syria, and elsewhere are not some new Cold War aimed at Russia.
Not because we want to isolate Russia, we don't, but because we want a strong Russia that's invested in working with us to strengthen the international system as a whole.
Chris Jansing is our NBC News senior White House correspondent, and I'm lucky to have her here in New York. Chris, it's so nice to see you. But let's talk about this big meeting that's taking place and also the White House position on the Assad regime, because it was Vladimir Putin who said it's a mistake not to cooperate with the Syrian government. Our position completely different.
We couldn't be more diametrically opposed about how we got to this position, why Syria is such a mess, what prompted the refugee crisis, what should be done about it. On every single level, Thomas, that disagreement was out there for the public to see today. I think it made for a dramatic start to the day and really setting up this meeting between the president and Vladimir Putin. Remember, these two have not sat down face to face for 2 years. It's a frosty relationship. The White House officials like to say it's a very business-like relationship. But when you see the two of them together and when you hear what they had to say today, you realize how far apart they are. I mean, first of all, you have to look at how they see Assad. Mr. Putin has said he is this bulwark against ISIS. He is what's standing between even a wider expansion of terror in that region. Mr. Obama says that he has to leave before the conflict in Syria is settled. So you have them on two opposite sides. You hear Vladimir Putin say he's critical to stability in the region, while President Obama is calling him a tyrant. And meantime, the pressure is building because the European nations who have borne the brunt of what has happened here with the refugee crisis, they have suffered the most, obviously, outside of those who are being persecuted within Syria and murdered within Syria, to come up with a solution. And nobody thinks there's a quick solution, an easy solution, or, as a matter of fact, that this is going to stop before hundreds of thousands, if not more, refugees continue to flee.
One thing that was really interesting, Chris, is that both men, even President Rouhani of Iran, spoke about democracy and expanding democracy around the globe, but the different perspectives it takes to do that. It seemed Vladimir Putin touched on that when he said that the UN is a place where we can see other nations' perspectives and then come up with a compromise. Do we expect anything substantial to come out of this meeting, or maybe a little frost to come off the relationship?
This is going to be very difficult. Look, you already had a situation where just yesterday we saw Vladimir Putin, who has shown himself, particularly in the situation in Syria, to have an ability to inject himself at a critical moment and seem like he's the guy who's coming in and riding to the rescue. He has suddenly taken on the mantle of, I'm the person who's going to assemble the coalition to fight ISIS, whereas that is something that not only President Obama, but the coalition that he built a year ago when the situation was getting so bad has really continued to have throughout this process. So you have someone who has come out, and this is what is sort of classic with the UN speeches, which we should say are supposed to last 15 minutes and often go on for much longer than that. But so this is the opportunity, right, for them to send a message to their constituents, to the world, and to that other person. When you heard what Barack Obama and Vladimir Putin had to say on that public stage today, it's very hard to see that they go into that meeting this afternoon or early this evening with sort of an idea that we're going to bridge this huge chasm.
All right, hopefully it's a first step, a baby step in the right direction. Chris Jansing, great to see you. Thank you, Chris.
The White House House thinks so.
All right. So we're joined now by Senator Angus King of Maine. He's a member of the Senate Intelligence Committee. That's Raul Reyes. So we'll get to the senator here in a second. Do we have the senator?
I'm here.
There he is. Senator
Thomas.
King, great to see
Yes,
you,
sir.
So when we were listening to President Obama and his speech, also hearing from Vladimir Putin, and he feels that we need to be supportive of the Syrian government, do you feel Bashar al-Assad needs to go, and who should be his replacement?
Yes, Assad is the Islamic State's evil twin. He's the one that brought him into existence in the first place. He's the one that they're all fighting against, including all kinds of other opposition who aren't Islamic State, who aren't jihadists. I mean, the trouble with Putin's position is that as long as Assad is there, there's going to be a war going on there, and Assad hasn't, he makes it worse every day. He barrel bombs his own people. He's creating all this refugees. So Russia could play a constructive role here, because Assad has been their client for many years, but the constructive role would be to ease him out in some way, leave some structure of government there, and then allow some kind of a new government to come in place that involves at least the moderate opposition, what's left of it after the last 3 years. But to say that somehow you can fight ISIL and leave Assad, that just doesn't pass the straight face test.
And one thing to remind people, war is a business. There are people around this nation, around the globe, that are making money from the destabilization of these zones.
Well, I think that's always the case, but I think it sometimes gets to that gets more attention than it deserves. I don't think business interests are driving this. I think they're geopolitical interests. Russia wants a foothold in the Middle East, and the last place that they have left is northwestern Syria, and I think they want to secure that. But that ought to be part of the negotiation, instead of saying Assad himself has to stay. He's become the symbol of this oppressive regime that bombs its own people. And as long as he's there, it's going to be very hard. Now, on the other hand, if Russia wants to join the coalition and help us and many others to take on ISIL, that would be fine. But if it's, we got to prop up Assad. The question is, what is their real motivation? Is it to take on ISIL, or is it to prop up Assad? If it's the latter, then it's a policy that ultimately is not going to work. The best thing they could do to help us confront ISIL is to ease Assad out.
Meanwhile, GOP frontrunner Donald Trump gives his blessing to Vladimir Putin to go in and take care of ISIS. He did so in 60 Minutes. Take a look.
If you look at Syria, Russia wants to get rid of ISIS. We want to get rid of ISIS. Maybe let Russia do it. Let them get rid of ISIS. What the hell do we care?
Okay, that's Syria. What do you do in Iraq with ISIS?
Look, with ISIS in Iraq, you got to knock them out.
How do you do that?
You got to fight them. You got to fight them. You have to send in. If you need, you're going to have to do that. Yes.
So what do you make of that, Senator? Do you think that that is a strategy that we could consider?
I think the problem with his analysis is he ignores what brought ISIS into existence in the first place, which is Assad, and the fact that Assad is, as I say, killing his own people, driving these half the population of Syria has been driven either into external exile or internal exile. And so to say, oh, yeah, let's just turn the Syria anti-ISIL operation over to Russia would cement Assad into place, which would only further the conflict. And, I'm not sure Russia would have any better luck in Syria trying to pull that off than they did in Afghanistan 25 or 30 years ago. So I do think there's a place for a relationship with Russia, because we do have a common interest. They are worried about the rise of ISIS. They're worried about terrorists and jihadists in Chechnya and in their country. So they have that concern. Let's build on that. But to say that Assad has to stay in order for them to be involved and helpful, that's just not going to work.
Senator Angus King, sir, thanks for being with us. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Thomas.
One thing I want to get in this conversation, Chris Jansen, your amazing producer, Kristen Donnelly, just posted this in News Connect, talking about some of the first interactions between Obama and Putin. Print reporters saying they did shake hands, but get this. President Obama delivered a brief toast, I guess over a lunch, but they ended with "Never abandon the pursuit of peace." Apparently, the president clinked glasses with several world leaders and did not with Putin, sitting one seat over from him. In fact, President Obama barely looked in that direction. They say they did shake hands.
I mean, when you listen to Putin's speech, he went after the president pretty strongly. He openly mocked the training program and frankly, a training program that has not worked. To help fight ISIS. But let me just say one more thing about the meeting from the White House perspective, Thomas, which is this. I mean, they will acknowledge, as the president did today, that the Iran nuclear deal was helped along by the Russians. They have said very clearly they believe you have to engage your enemies as well as your friends if you're going to make progress. So that's really what this meeting is about today, a belief on the part of this president and this administration that they could go in there and potentially make some progress in Syria against ISIS. They've said if Russia wants to help us with ISIS, we're all for that help. But as you can see from that report, from what happened just a short time ago, with a healthy dose of skepticism.
All right, Chris Jensen, thanks so much. And it was in the last